Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to wait a few seconds to start this event. So just bear with us about 20 or maybe 30 seconds and we'll get going. Right, I think we'll make a start. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is the AJ 100 virtual festival. This afternoon, we're joined by Rachel Mundell, who's an Associate Director at Allies and Morrisons, who's going to be talking about one building for living and learning at Wadham College in Oxford. Just to let you know, after that, I'm going to be doing a very brief presentation about how zinc's used on educational buildings around the world in different shapes and forms. And then at the end of that, we're going to have a Q&A. So there's a Q&A box in Zoom, so please enter your questions and we'll try and get to as many of those as possible. The overall session should last between 40 and 45 minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the screen over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll just share my screen. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this talk on the Dorothy Wadham building in Oxford. My name's Rachel Mundell. I'm an architect and Associate Director at Allies and Morrison. The building that I'm going to talk to you about today is student accommodation for second-year students at Wadham College in Oxford. I'd just like to thank Jonathan and VMZINC for inviting us to talk here today and for their collaboration on the zinc roof at this project, which you'll see plenty of pictures of as I go through the presentation. The building was procured through a design and build contract, and the main contractor was Gilbert Ash. The structural engineers were Engineers HRW, and the mechanical engineers were Skelly and Cooch. The building opened in September 2019 to 135 second-year students, which make up the whole second-year cohort at Wadham College. It was able to operate in the last year, although probably not quite as the college had originally envisaged. But I know that some students did remain in residence throughout lockdown. And certainly in this week, I think the college are now inviting back the new intake of second years to start their term. And I think at the end of the month, they hope to be fully occupied, which is fantastic. I was thinking long and hard about how to show the building to you today. And this theme of community is one that kept coming back to me. It was there right from the start of the project, from Wadham as a client in the initial briefing, right from warden level through to bursar, domestic bursar, and all the fellows that were involved in the project. They really had the health and well-being of their students at kind of the heart of the aspiration, and really understood how the quality of the built environment could have quite a strong impact on their kind of health and well-being. So I've set up this kind of diagram that you can see on the screen today, which is thinking about putting yourself in the shoes of a second-year student at Wadham College and the series of social networks that they kind of exist within, right from the broad scale of feeling a part of Wadham College as a whole, down to feeling part of the community and connected to the community in which they're living, which is actually in this case, the residential area of the Iffy Road, and then part of the second year cohort, that community of 135 students that they're living within, right down to their individual staircase that might have kind of 40 people living around it, to their cluster flat of 6 to 7 people, and then down to their individual study bedroom. So this theme is going to run through the presentation with us and kind of design decisions from the macro to terms of building layout right down to individual details. You'll see how this importance of social connectivity and connectedness is kind of run throughout the project. So beginning then, part of Wadham, as you can see from this diagram, the red dot marks the centre of historic Oxford, which is where Wadham's principal campus is based. And due to the kind of density of the historic buildings there and the sensitivity of the sites, there was no space left to build. So Wadham bought this site down on the Iffy Road, which, connected by this red dotted line, is about a 20-minute walk or a 10-minute cycle ride down to the residential area in southeast Oxford, which is where this project is located. So whilst there was this physical disconnect, our initial thoughts for the new building wanted to strike up an identity and a kind of recognizable connection, kind of mental affinity, if you like, between the new building and the main college site in the centre of town, and especially as this is, the new accommodation is for second years. They may have spent their first year living in the accommodation that you can see on the left-hand side of the image here, which is a little sketch of Wadham's 17th century historic quad around which rooms are based, and then the idea on the right for the layout of the Dorothy Wadham building. And so then looking more closely at that concept, it's quite a simple one, and it's kind of time old, that you come in to this through the entrance on the centre of the Iffy Road elevation at the bottom of the drawing, into from the outside into the building past the Porter's Lodge, and then out again into an external courtyard around which you circulate to have access into an individual staircase that would take you up through the floors of the building and to your individual front door of your cluster flat. So, and then you can see that layout described in more detail here in the ground floor plan of the building. So the main entrance off of the Iffy Road, and then into an internal courtyard around which you go to your individual front door, up the staircase and into your flats. And it's this, and just to point out on this drawing while we're here, facing you as you enter the courtyard is the garden room, which is a flexible space that can be used by everybody living on the site. So this very recognisable general arrangement of the building would make, we felt, the students feel like this was a home from home, and remind them of the collegiate community of which they were part. That second community that honing in those social networks is that of the Iffy Road, a residential area in which this new building was going to be placed. And it's quite difficult student accommodation because it's at once residential but also institutional. So it was really important to us that this building felt integrated and not alienated in this location. So you can see within the red line is the site boundary that we're looking at, and the buildings there are 1960s petrol filling station, car showroom. This was replaced some existing Victorian semi-detached villas, which very much matched the rest of the fabric of the street, which I think were demolished to make way for this building. So we began, it was really important to us that, given that this typology was slightly different to that which governed the area, that the building could lead in terms of making the fabric a part of this community, and then perhaps the students would follow. So we looked a lot at the building is on the edge of the Iffy Road conservation area in which the rest of the street actually sits. So we spent a long time studying the existing typologies, and you see these 3 to 4 story Victorian villa buildings with their gable ends facing the street and these stepping facades. And this drawing just shows how we were mapping the brickwork colours in order to determine what colour we might choose for our building. And I think we're pleased with the result of a quietly contextual building, which does reference some of the existing buildings along the street, but is kind of almost immediately an important part of its place. And I really enjoy this photo with the kind of profanity of the existing objects along the Iffy Road, with the zebra crossing and the street lighting or the wonky signage, and then how the building just kind of gently nestles in as kind of a polite backdrop to the everyday workings of the people that are living in this area. But at the same time, it's sort of unashamedly modern in some of the detailing, which is really crisp and really enjoy quite a lot. One of the other moves that we made to kind of integrate the building more into the area is the stepping down in scale as you go from the principal Iffy Road elevation down to these residential side streets. And you can see that here with the sort of wing buildings, which are 2.5 stories high. But then also an important move was the separation of the principal building and the side buildings, such that residents in the local area are able to see into the courtyard as they're passing by. So then working from the outside in, thinking about the second year students that are living here and how they can feel more a part of that second year community. If the dark black is showing the private study bedrooms that are located around the perimeter, so once you enter the building, we've been careful to locate the shared kitchen common rooms such that they overlook the courtyard, and they create, so this is not a lawn space that's keep off the grass. This is very much a space that the students are invited to interact over, and to have some energy and to sort of certainly spill out space to use for whatever they want to use it for. So clustering these semi-private kitchen common rooms around the courtyard space was quite important to us, and this is just an early sketch that we used at competition stage to show that difference in architecture from the brick punch hole windows on the outer facades to these much lighter, more heavily glazed common rooms that could look across the courtyard space and interact with one another. So you might see some of your friends in an adjacent kitchen and know a bit about their comings and goings. And you can see that in this bit more detail in this first floor plan of the building. So coming up an individual staircase, there's then front doors to two cluster flats either side with study bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, and then 6 or 7 people sharing a kitchen space. Those kitchens then overlooking the internal courtyard. And that the architectural expression of those semi-public kitchen spaces makes itself apparent on the Iffy Road facade with this metal and timber architecture, and draws you into the public entrance to the building through the foyer, past the reception, the porter's lodge, and then emerging into the courtyard, where you can see the projecting common rooms and their sort of transparency really enliven and activate this courtyard space. And as you circulate around the courtyard, make your way into the front entrance into your staircase, you walk past these common rooms at ground floor, where even if you're not feeling particularly sociable that day, you're able to see a little bit about what's going on with the other people living in the development. And then maybe a little bit more of an exaggeration of that idea with these sliding doors into those common room areas that allow students to look out over the courtyard. And coming back down to ground floor level and thinking about the building that's on the right-hand side of this image, on the eastern elevation of the courtyard is the garden room. This space is shared as kind of a JCR common room for all of the students that are living on the site. But it's got quite a lot of work to do, because outside of term time, the idea is that the rooms would be could be occupied by summer schools, and this flexible, multi-purpose, single-story building can at once be a common space for gathering or for a larger lecture, but it splits down into 3 smaller partitioned rooms which can act as individual classrooms for teaching in that summertime, in that summer school situation. So you can see the architectural treatment is the same as those projecting kitchen common rooms, because it falls into that family of more public rooms where there might be more social interaction in the private study rooms. And having a look inside that space, the idea is constructed from CLT as the principal structure, and the 3 individual spaces, these pyramid roofs, are made by the white acoustic paneling that you can see running in the opposite direction. So you get these 2 different material surfaces that are topped by a roof light at the apex. And then you can see the sliding doors onto the garden allow the space to spill out into the courtyard. The bottom right-hand diagram shows how this one large, I think 150 square metre rectilinear space is able to split down into these 3 smaller classrooms. And then on the back wall, we've got fitted joinery into which the sliding acoustic partitions can fit. And behind these sliding screens are flat screen TVs or presentation modes for when it's in classroom, or actually I think at the end of last year when the building was occupied by the students, I think there was often gatherings in the evening for kind of TV viewings. I think RuPaul's Drag Race was quite a popular television program that people used to gather to like watching together, or maybe a big rugby game and come down with a drink. And the space is occupied with sofas at the moment for that purpose. Beyond the white doors in the background is a fully equipped catering kitchen. So at any time of the year, but also in that summertime use, it's possible to seat and provide hot food for up to 150 people in the space. So going from that large kind of second year cohort, zooming in a little bit on the everyday comings and goings of the student, the staircases, of which there might be 6 flats, so maybe up to 40 people sharing them, quite a space to be enjoyed. And we wanted to do something quite special here, rather than just a kind of straightforward circulation space. This could potentially be a space to meet or to linger for an additional 5 minutes if you felt so inclined. So the top right-hand image is just the structural concept for the building overall, where the ground to second floor was concrete frame with in situ vertical columns and precast Omnia slabs to get an exposed concrete soffit for the horizontal floors. And then the top floor of the building was CLT construction, partly for speed of construction, but also giving a great flat deck onto which to put the unventilated zinc roof, which runs across the whole building. And going back to the stair then, the idea was that we could bring this top floor CLT with exposed walls at the top floor, bring that down throughout the building, through all floors, down to the ground floor, by making the staircase out of CLT. And thus just providing a kind of more homely feel, a softer natural material in these spaces, much better for sort of the acoustics and the general sense of wanting to be there. So the way this stair is working, the balustrade is a structural beam that goes between the main landing and the half landing, which allows the treads to cantilever and have this disconnect with the walls, allowing some of the daylight down into the lower floors. And you get this expression of the laminated CLT on the underside. And then as you arrive at the top floor of the building, I quite enjoy the way the exposed concrete core then transitions into the CLT, creating quite delightful top-lit spaces on the top floor of the building. And the stairs are different in each of the 4 buildings around the site. So whilst using the same concept and the same materials, it gave us the opportunity to create quite different spaces. Just dropped this in really to talk a little bit more about that use of timber. This is the reception area where each cluster has its own private locker space for delivery of parcels, and they have a card which they can access and pick up their post. But internally, this was one of those great projects where we were lucky enough to be involved in the design, even down to the details and the fit out and the furniture right at the end of the project. So the concept was for using this ash timber, sometimes in solid, sometimes in veneer, internally with a whitewash to stop it from yellowing. And then that same use of ash was brought to the outside of the building in these laminated, finger jointed, heat treated and pre-weathered posts, which are applied to the common room areas and the bedroom windows on the outside of the building. So it was just that little introduction of quite a small amount of timber just really softens the whole building, I think, and it's really important for the students to be surrounded by these natural materials. So then the last kind of stage of your journey, if you like, if you've circulated right from Oxford, journey to Iffy Road, come into the quad, gone up your stair, and then you arrive in your cluster. So this is a flat with a locked front door to which only you and perhaps 5 or 6 other people have access. And you may or may not have chosen to live with these people. So this is a shot, obviously, of the common room looking out over the courtyard, and the furniture within these spaces, so the dining table and the soft seating. Obviously the kitchen's fitted, but beyond that we've tried as much as possible to have as much flexibility in the space so that the students are able to arrange it in a way that suits them best. I just wanted to point out, so looking in more detail at a typical cluster, as you come off the staircase and through the front entrance, what we quite enjoy is that the kitchen is located as soon as you come in. So there's this opportunity to look in, to see who's about, to decide if you want to go and socialise or not before you go into your bedroom. Often the common rooms are at the end because that's where you need maybe dual aspect or the most daylight. And it's sort of a shame in a way to not have that opportunity to interact before you then go into a space of isolation, I suppose. So in addition to that, there's some generosity in the width of the corridors, and they open up around the bedroom entrance doors, which gives kind of a pause or a waiting place. And then we've often been able to achieve natural daylighting into most of the corridors, which has been quite an important aspect of the general sense of, and experience of the building. And here's just a shot of that end bay of that corridor where you're looking out back down the Iffy Road. I just wanted to mention one really small detail which almost got value engineered out of the project, but luckily I think it's great that it remained in, and these are these free swing self-closers on the bedroom doors. It's a small detail, but this is a fire corridor and they would be fire doors, but that closer just allows the student to keep the door open if that's what they wish, and then it's overridden in a fire situation. And you can see just from this image, there's the benefits of the social interaction across the corridor, feeling much more like you're in a domestic environment rather than an institutional one, but also the added benefit of the natural light that's coming into the corridor space from the bedroom windows either side. So then ending up in the bedroom as the most private of all the spaces, a lot of thought was put into the arrangement of joinery and furniture in these rooms. And I'm pleased that there was, because I guess the students are going to be spending perhaps a bit more time in these rooms than they otherwise might have done this year. You can see the way that the joinery zones the bedroom into an area for sleeping and an area for study. A few small details that make the room, I think, much more comfortable and supportive of the students' well-being. Nestling the radiator panel into the joinery such that it's out the way and it doesn't clutter the room. An acoustic attenuated side vent so that you can have ventilation, but the noise from the Iffy Road, if that bothers you, can drop off. If that doesn't bother you and you prefer kind of straightforward ventilation and a sense of openness to the outside, then there is also an openable window. Bringing the window all the way down to the floor to allow as much daylight into the room as possible. Having two different types of blinds, one for solar shading and then one for full blackout. And then this kind of open book approach to creating this study corner, on the back of which is the pin board and all of the USB and Wi-Fi and charging sockets that you would require in the bedroom. And then beyond that, everything else is loose. So if the student would like to rotate the desk and face out of the window on any particular day, then that's also completely fine. So within quite a small space, there's quite a lot of ergonomic detail going on, but also an ability to change and to flex depending on the mood. And then at the macro scale, because of the stepping of the building and the pitching of the roof, there's also a great deal of variety in the rooms available within the development. And this one, for example, showing the apex as in the top floor rooms and the cracking kind of views over the Iffy fields in the distance. So just to summarise then, I think of all the things that the second year of Wadham College are going to have to face this year, hopefully their built environment and their sense of community and connectedness is not one of them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That was really, really interesting. Obviously, I know quite a lot about the roof, but it's really nice to get a tour of the actual inside of the building. Don't always get that, so that was really good. Before we have any questions, I'm just going to do a very brief presentation on zinc. around the world in educational buildings, which will probably last about 10 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Share and there we go. Right, so my name's Jonathan Lowy. I'm from VMZINC. I actually did a presentation in July about around the world in 80 zinc projects, and I realized that quite a lot of the projects that we've done are actually educational buildings, so I sort of thought I'd keep the same slide. We always seem to start off in Paris. This is actually a photo of the Sorbonne. Sorbonne was founded in the 13th century. Zinc isn't quite that old, but it all kicked off with Napoleon III and Baron Haussmann in the middle of the 19th century. And nearly all the metal in Paris is zinc. It often combines with slate, but the actual metal is zinc. And on the right, you can see the Grand Palais, which is on the Champs-Élysées, and that was recently renovated. All those ornaments, spun zinc, soldered zinc, folded zinc. So it's been around quite a long time. And in the UK, this is part of Liverpool Central Library. And this is the Picton Reading Room, which was built in 1879 with a zinc roof and renovated 8 years ago by Austin Smith Lord. And the dome was obviously kept. The zinc was replaced after 130 years. It probably needed a little bit of work. And the batten caps were kept, but we added standing seams to bring it up to 21st century technology. So just a quick word on standing seam and batten caps. Batten caps, as I mentioned, have been around for 200 years, and it's basically just a U panel with a timber batten and then a flashing over the top. And in the middle at the bottom there, you can see a photo from the Wallace collection in London. And on the right, there's a simple sketch basically showing a cross section between across the batten cap. The top, which was used on Wadham College, is standing seam, where you basically just have the seams, the zinc, which is seamed together to create a 25mm standing seam. And here, this is a school by Walters and Cohen in Newham. This is actually an extension. There was an old nursery building, and this has been replaced with this new building. It had to keep with the scale of the streetscape. So it's designed to fit in with a fairly tight residential area. Again, somewhat similar to Wadham. The zinc is on the roof and the wall, the gutters, the window flashings, the whole skin of this building. And again, another school, this time Charterhouse. This is a project that was designed by Design Engine. And here you've got quite a 19th century Gothic type architecture. And whilst the zinc has a low slope roof, there's quite a lot of verticality in the original campus, but also in this new building with the narrow high windows and the chimneys, which are extract chimneys for the science block. The other interesting part about this is there's very little internal circulation. So I don't know whether Design Engine sort of knew what was coming, but all the classrooms here have direct access to the outside, which obviously makes things a little bit easier at the moment. This is a new building at the University of East Anglia in Norwich, this time with dark grey anthracite shingles. Again, it has a bit of a theme of a living and working connected environment to it. And just to touch on the shingles, sometimes people ask what are shingles, what's flat lock? Really the same thing. You can generally used on walls. You can have vertical panels, horizontal panels, rectangular panels, diamond panels. On the left, at the bottom, you've got examples of different standard sizes. So there's an awful lot of options that are available in all the finishes of zinc that we produce. And just actually, before I go on to the next one, that slide on the right also shows a substrate a metal substrate, which is obviously important if you need to have a non-combustible wall build-up. Staying with the theme of the shingles, this is in Austria on the Danube, the Krems Gallery, a very striking art gallery building, not quite a school, but sort of certainly connected culturally, where Martin Architects were commissioned to create a really striking building in a fairly sort of traditional conservative environment. And they used the shingles made from textured zinc called Azingar to create this striking facade. Just moving on to slightly different techniques. On the left is a school, actually in New Orleans, and on the right is a church in New Orleans, so slightly off the educational theme. But I wanted to show this to you because zinc has been tested, but this has been tested with Hurricane Katrina, which happened 15 years ago now, in 2005. And you can see on the right, the windows were blown out, the flat roof was peeled off. And on the left, the panels are almost untouched. In fact, on the right as well, the left is interlocking Rainscreen panels, and on the right, it's a standing seam wall. The Rainscreen panels, which are shown here, are fairly simple cassettes. You don't need to do things in standing seam. This is a Rainscreen zinc cassette which sits on cladding rails, very similar to an aluminium wall panel. And here, not far from New Orleans, this is actually in Texas, where these panels have been used vertically, using different widths, and using the pigmento red zinc. So this is zinc which has a pigment's been added to the weathering to give it a slight redness. It's not a paint, it's a pigment. Moving back to Europe, Belgium here, standing seam with Quartz Inc panels showing the flexibility of zinc. Zinc's not soft like lead, but it is malleable enough to create very interesting shapes and forms, or to clad interesting shapes and forms, I should say. Another advantage of zinc wall cladding, it's fairly easy to create a relatively light wall. So in this project in Paris, with a sort of early 19th century building, has been extended upwards to create this extra floor. If you did that in masonry, it would be an awful lot more weight and it would create structural problems. And another system that's actually been used more and more, I'm not sure whether it's a sort of in vogue, corrugated or sine wave panels in zinc, here in a university in Grenoble in the French Alps. This is one of the few systems where you actually have a visible fastener. So you're screwing it back to, again, cladding rails. Obviously, the advantage with zinc over many other metals is that you cut the edge of the zinc and you're just exposing more zinc. There's no metal that's going to start corroding because it's not painted. And in northern Italy, in Venice, the architects here on this university building used anthrazinc, so the dark zinc again, to clad the building, and they varied. This is all standing seam, but they varied the modules, giving an interesting texture to this quite imposing, striking building. But the various widths sort of maybe softens it a little bit. And in Barcelona, the Quartz Inc, this is the same material that was used on Wadham College. In this school, standing seam, but with operable shutters. Again, zinc's relatively light, so it can be used to clad things like this, which aren't going to create problems for the motors. This project is nothing spectacular, but I came across it recently and I thought, just because of the name of it, Ecole de Foiegra. I'm not going to go into what foie gras is, unless anybody's got specific questions, but you'd only have this in France. It does show that you can have fairly low slope roofs. 3 degrees as built is the minimum. You can't do a zinc roof, a flat zinc roof. It does need to have a minimum fall of 3 degrees as built. And just before we sort of get to questions, I wanted to show this project, which was done, as I said, probably Rachel knows more about this. This is an Allies and Morrison's project in Cambridge, Girton College. Quite different, but again using brickwork, a very different type of brick. But what and fitting in with again a 19th century somewhat Gothic campus. But I really think that the Quartz Inc and the brick that's chosen marries really beautifully. And the photo in the middle, which is a really nice little detail, the recessed joints on the facade with a with the Quartz Inc downpipe. So before we get to questions, I just wanted to let you know I've gone through some aspects of residential, educational buildings, but we can do lots of other things with zinc. So if you do want any more information, CPD, technical details, please contact us, email, telephone number, website. We also can offer you lists of contractors, because it is important that the design is correct, but also the installation. So we have VMZINC at Work partners that can install the product correctly. That is vital. And if that's done correctly, really the building should be left to its own devices for 100 years or maybe even more. So thank you very much for that. We're just going to come back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to come back to questions. So I think there is a question for Rachel about CLT. How difficult was it to convince the client using CLT if it was not their decision? And what were the main technical challenges of using two different structural systems, in situ timber frame in one building?
Yeah, thank you for that. It wasn't necessarily their decision, but they were a client that was quite led by the design team, especially in those initial kind of concept stages. But it also wasn't that difficult to convince them. I think it was a slightly different environment. This was a kind of pre-Grenfell decision-making time. Things, it's true, have changed slightly, or kind of apprehension towards timber as a construction material may or may not have changed slightly. But also the engineers, HRW, had used CLT quite a lot before, so there was kind of a proficiency and a knowledge within the design team that I think helped to convince the client. And we didn't actually use it on all floors of the building. And actually one of the things in reflection, I think, is a good thing. Having the concrete column structure for the lower floors does give you flexibility in terms of sustainability. And this is a college that are going to own this building, hopefully, and look after it for a very long time into the future. And they may want to use it for something quite different. And if you're using CLT for the whole structure, every wall is a cross wall. And in student accommodation, where the rooms are only 3 meters wide, it really doesn't leave you much flexibility in terms of the future use of that building. So I think restricting it actually to their one top floor, where it worked its hardest and it was the best substrate for the roof, made a lot of sense for this particular project.
Okay, excellent. There's another question for you, Rachel, this time from Sue Churchill, saying a beautiful building full of lots of passive measures for well-being that really should be a part of every student accommodation scheme. But would you be able to share approximate cost per room? An idea of costs, always tricky.
Yeah, and I best not, just in terms of the client, thinking of them, and but if the point maybe being made in the question, which is one I have been asking myself as well, is this affordable at any level, these passive measures, or is it just in the kind of higher end buildings? And I think it's the lessons learned for us as a practice, really. It's just the sort of general arrangement of the building has led to a lot of these wins in terms of social interaction. So I don't think it necessarily has to involve a great deal of cost. And it's true that yeah, other projects that we're looking at on a tighter budget, you can still achieve some of these things.
I just seeing the presentation, it seemed to me that the building, the arrangement of the building is very COVID safe. It sort of seems to work in very well with what we've got at the moment. I mean, I can't believe that was that was thought forward, but it seems that it should work well.
It is true though that space is a premium, isn't it? And a COVID space building is often a building where you know, you're afforded more space, and I guess the ensuite bathrooms, which isn't always possible in all typologies, but that has really helped. Yeah, so I've just spoken to them this week, and an update is that whilst some of their other buildings that they've had to change or adapt or not be able to fully occupy, they are able to with this building. So it's great. It's good.
Yeah, that's really good. A question, I think this is for me, asking whether zinc cladding will be impacted by leaving the European Union. I suppose the obvious answer is who knows. Zinc is all our zinc is produced in France. And it always has been since the company was founded in 1837, and zinc has been used, VMZINC, that is, around the world pretty much since then. So I would like to think that there'll be a way of getting through whatever Brexit situation we find ourselves in. It's not going to affect production in any way. It's not really going to affect transport. Could tariffs be involved? It's possible, but I suppose that's possible for anything. So it's unlikely there's going to be any major problem with supplying, even in the worst case scenario, no deal scenario. So hopefully not. Well, I'd like to first of all say thanks to the AJ for organising the festival, the AJ 100, and I'd like to say thank you very much to Rachel Mundell from Allies and Morrison for presenting Wadham College. It was, as I said, it was really good for me. I've seen the roof. I hadn't seen much else, so it was fascinating. I hope you all enjoyed that, if you do have any questions for me concerning zinc, please let us know, and look forward to seeing and hearing from you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks. That's Rachel. Goodbye, everybody.